All right, welcome to Scott's Shelf. Today we're talking about the book Essentialism by Greg McKeown. So essentialism is this idea that we can do less, but do everything we do better. And it's the idea that we can be more effective, we can have more meaningful lives, and we can more positively impact the people around us by focusing on what is essential. And he goes into quite a bit of detail about a couple of layers. So first there's the mindset. So shifting mindset from what he describes as the non-essentialism mindset, which is the idea that we can do everything all the time, and that we don't have control over what we choose to do. So either of those ideas can push us towards non-essentialism. It's then, after explaining that mindset of essentialism, like, hey, we can focus on just a few really important things that each of us can contribute, that shift in mindset sets us up to follow a process of narrowing down the things that are important for us to do or for us to pay attention to. And ultimately, we can incorporate that into our character. So it's the idea of doing less, but better, and having that as both a mindset and a process that ultimately helps us become more effective individuals at a character level, so that we can just walk around aiming our limited resources more appropriately. So who could benefit from the book Essentialism? Anybody who feels overwhelmed. So if you feel like you're getting pulled in a million directions at once, you don't have enough time, you don't have enough energy, or you don't feel like you're in control of your life, any of those types of overwhelm are a sign that we're letting ourselves get pulled away from the essential aspects of our lives and getting pulled into non-essential tasks or busy work or things that don't have as much value in our lives. So second is the feeling of being off mission. So anybody who feels like their efforts and actions in their lives aren't lining up with what's personally meaningful and important to them would benefit from a read through Essentialism to help clear out some of the clutter that's getting in the way and creating obstacles between action and meaning in your life. And lastly, anybody who wants to be more effective. So I've been speaking globally about people trying to change their lives, get more traction. But if there's just one arena where you want to become more effective, maybe you're more comfortable testing out the ideas of essentialism at work, or maybe just on one work project, or maybe in a sport or a hobby. So if you want to be more effective in any one domain, you can incorporate the principles of essentialism, see how they work there. But then I'm going to guess you're going to want that effectiveness to spread globally through the rest of your life. So let's look at my takeaways. So my takeaways from this, first off, one thing that struck me is that Greg McKeown says he makes it a point to read from the classics every morning. And I think that's fantastic. There's so many good reasons to read books that authors have invested a lot of their time and energy and lives in. He has an interesting twist. So his twist is that he wants to read things that were written down a few hundred years ago or more. And I forget exactly what his cutoff was for how long ago it was written. But I think that's a great sorting point. If you need to sort down and just read things from a certain era, things that have survived longer are more likely to have broad, enduring meanings, enduring value that applies not just at a specific point in time or to a specific culture or a group of people, but broadly. So read from the classics every morning. That spoke to my heart for sure. Second, the idea that exploration has a goal. So some of us are temperamentally inclined to seek out the new and enjoy that and have more fun discovering new things than getting into routines and patterns and doing the same things over and over again. Other people are more comfortable with that setup, that let's have everything organized, orderly, and it'll stay the same. So as someone who is more temperamentally inclined to go out and explore because it's fun, it's a good reminder that I need to be a little more focused and disciplined about my exploration and use that as a process for discerning what's essential in my life. So exploration for me is a blast. I love learning new things, but I need to find those rare nuggets of ideas or processes or activities that are going to make my life more valuable, and make sure I'm exploring with that end in mind. For folks who don't enjoy exploration or new things, he sets out a good set of reasons why you can benefit from wider exploration, more time looking at new things so that you can pull in what's going to be valuable to you. Next up, subjective interest is a clue to importance. So this is something that's shown up a couple of places in books that I've been reading in the last 3 years. And this idea that we have an internal sense of what's important gets underlined here in Essentialism. And so as he goes through his mindset for determining what's going to be valuable, he highlights the fact that, when we're exploring, we should really pay attention to the things that grab our attention. And sounds like a no-brainer, but it falls in line with the idea that not everything is equally valuable to us. And so we'll get into this in a little bit, but since not everything is equally valuable, we really need to hang on to the things that are much more valuable to us. And subjective interest is a huge clue towards that. Lastly is the idea that play is important. So again, because I enjoy ideas and I enjoy experiencing new things, I lean into the idea of play. But Greg McKeown gives a really good account for how play can help us discover what's important in our lives, sort through some of the other stuff, and ultimately arrive at some better outcomes in life. This quote I wanted to share: to discern what is truly essential, we need space to think, time to look and listen, permission to play, wisdom to sleep, and the discipline to apply highly selective criteria to the choices we make. So I loved this quote because it highlights a lot of things that we tend to brush aside in, as McKeown terms it, the non-essentialist way of doing things. So he talks about in business, for example, the idea of sleep deprivation was like held up as a badge of honor. Like, I'm working so hard that I can only sleep 3-4 hours a night, and how ultimately that's destructive for us. And he does the same thing likewise with the idea of sleeping as permission to play. So just as we need sleep in order to find what's important in our lives, in order to do those things more effectively, we need permission to play in order to sort through and find those things as well. Space to think also spoke to me. So I tend to be reflective and I tend to incubate on ideas. And so sometimes I beat myself up for that, but he gave a wonderful account of, since most things are not important to each of us, we need to sort through. And the way we do that is by reflecting on it. So we need to give ourselves time to think in that way. So McKeown lays out a set of axioms, 3 axioms here, and then goes into his process and talks about incorporating that process more broadly into our lives so that it becomes part of who we are. The axioms are: we have a choice in how we spend our energy and time. 2, the scarcity of important things. So the fact that most things that we do are not going to be critically important. We need to find the few things that are and focus our time and energy on those. And 3rd, the idea of trade-offs. So we can't do it all. And the more information we get about other people and other people's lives and other ways of doing things and other priorities that other people have, the more we can feel that fear of missing out or that desire to keep up with the Joneses. And ultimately, we're not going to be successful if we try to do everything that everyone else is doing. So we have to accept that trade-offs need to be made. And if we're going to make trade-offs, go back to the 2nd axiom, the number of things that are really important is small. So we need to figure out what those are and not waste our time on the unimportant things, and then exercise that choice that we have. So if we believe those 3 axioms, that leads us pretty clearly to the idea of something akin to essentialism. In terms of the process, how McKeown guides us through doing this, so he puts up 3 parts to his book: explore, eliminate, and execute. And so the idea of exploration is that we need to set up clear criteria for ourselves as to what's important and what's not. And that idea of exploration involves the principle of play. It involves looking and listening more broadly than we're used to, and spending more time researching the possibilities of how we could spend our energy and time. So that exploration phase, he gives a lot of good examples about how people have done that and embraced that in an essentialist way, basically to cast a much wider net and then eliminate. So after we've cast a wide net for all the possible ways we could spend our time and energy, we need to set some really high standards. And that's where we start to eliminate almost everything, almost all of our choices. So he talks about the opportunity to choose between two good things. You know, which way should I go? Probably you should do neither. So he's talking about setting even higher standards. Like, is this a 90% match for something that's important to me, something that I can do really well, something that has traction for a need in the world? If it meets those standards to a very high degree, hang on to it. If not, wait for a different opportunity to show up. So that's where it feels to me like really tough. So essentialism means eliminating lots and lots of good things from your life in order to focus your time and energy on the really great things. And then that last idea, execute. So it's the idea that we're changing our default. So he talks about this non-essentialist way of being versus essentialists, and non-essentialists get into patterns of saying yes and get into patterns of taking on more than they can effectively do and taking on things that they're not super enthusiastic about and that they can't do as well as maybe somebody else. And so the idea of executing here is changing your default and then establishing a routine so that you don't have to use your limited willpower to just get yourself through the normal everyday actions. You get into a routine so that you can save your willpower for the really critical decision points where you're managing those trade-offs. And then he throws out an acronym that I believe a rugby coach used. I've heard it in other arenas, what's important now. And that stands for, WIN stands for what's important now. So those are three ways that he talks about executing on this idea of embodying these axioms, working through sort of putting on an essentialist mindset, digging into the processes, and doing that repeatedly in a way that builds the character of an essentialist, basically so that we can live a more examined life. And that leads us to some connections here. So there's a lot of connections with Stoic philosophy that I've read. So if you're interested in the Stoic philosophers, so if you've read Seneca or Marcus Aurelius, I think you will find a lot of things that resonate in McKeown's book, Essentialism. Also, if you're into high performance or flow state, and you've read Stephen Kotler's stuff about flow state, including Art of Impossible, I think you would really appreciate the parallels between the high performance aspects of essentialism and what Kotler outlines in terms of setting aside time for thinking and play as precursors for either performance or creative output. And also there's a big overlap in my mind between Greg McKeown's idea that we have this subjective sense of what's important, and we can practice getting more and more clear about that so that we can define our narrow window of maximum meaning and effectiveness in how we live our lives. And Jordan Peterson's idea that we should do what's meaningful, not what's expedient. So if you're interested in that aspect of Peterson's lectures and books, then I think you'd really enjoy Essentialism by Greg McKeown. So that's our overview video for Essentialism by Greg McKeown. Feel free to join us on Mighty Networks, and the address is up there, scotts-shelf.mn.co. So you can participate in deeper discussions, find more resources and links about each of these books that I discussed. And the opportunity exists for live book clubs via Zoom if people are interested in that. Take care. I'll see you later on Scott Shelf.